Hello, hello, everybody. We are here with Dalton Richardson, an aquarist. I don't know which is the right pronunciation, but I'm sure anybody here who has read that word has been like, how do I pronounce this? Uh, at the Monterey Bay Aquarium. Dalton, what is the correct pronunciation of your title?
Hey, Ernest. Happy to be here. Thanks for having me on. I'm a aquarist, so but uh, a lot of people get it mixed up with like signs and things like that. Not an
Yes,
Aquarius,
yes.
Virgo, but I'm an aquarist though. Yeah,
No
so
problem, man. Thank you. And thank you again for being here. It's been a long time coming, but that's because we wanted to make sure that everyone was in place and ready to go. And Dalton, you've got one of those careers that I think is just infinitely interesting to people. It's not someone that you run into every day, an aquarist. And so what really drew you to the job of being an aquarist? Like what called you?
so it's sort of a longer story.
Mm,
So whenever I was growing up, my dad was in the Navy actually. So we bopped around quite a bit whenever I was younger. We actually did two tours where we were stationed in Guam. So we lived in Guam for a total of 8 years, 5 years the first time and 3 years the second time. And we spent a lot of weekends at the beach. I can remember a lot of times spent snorkeling on gorgeous, pristine, coral reefs. We spent a lot of time going on boats and going dolphin watching, things like
mm.
that. So eventually, we moved to Oklahoma, and I was in high school at that point. I needed some National Honor Society volunteer hours,
Okay.
as a lot of high schoolers I'm sure can relate.
Yes, I can
And one of my friends
imagine.
made an offhand comment like, "Hey, we should go volunteer at the zoo to get our hours. It would be a lot of fun. We'd get our hours." And so I actually looked into it. They had a high school volunteer program, and so my senior year of high school, I spent as many hours as I could at the zoo. And of the 500 that I volunteered my senior year, 200 of those were in the aquarium. So yeah, I kind of just fell into it between my
Okay.
affinity from my childhood
Yes,
and this opportunity that I sort of just walked into. I That's how I wound up in this career, or it set me on the path to this
sure.
career.
It's almost like you were born for it.
Yeah, you could say that for sure.
Hmm. Yeah.
So,
And so that's really cool that you kind of were an active high schooler. I was too. My parents were teachers, so I really didn't have a choice in that regard. Um, and so then you talked about growing up in different places. Is there a place that you necessarily call home, or that is there a place that you say, oh, I mostly grew up here, or a place that you felt like was most impactful in your upbringing?
probably Guam was the most
Okay.
impactful to my upbringing. I think that as someone who frequently moved around a lot, my
Yeah,
concept of where home is a little fluid, more so than
sure.
like I think most people. Um, but as far as like the place that I like really feel like a lot of like affinity towards and nostalgia towards, it would definitely be Guam. Um, After we left Guam for the last time, we did move to Oklahoma, where I lived for 7 years. So I think that was also particularly impactful to my upbringing. I finished high
Hmm.
school and did all of my college schooling there. So,
Okay, two very different places. One's in the middle of the ocean and the other's in the middle of the continent.
Ernest, can you
Uh,
imagine my disappointment when we left like this tropical paradise and then moved to like, very flat, nowhere
the
near
plains.
ocean? I
Yes.
was Yes, it was quite the adjustment for sure. But I think that, you know, being a military brat required me to have a lot of adaptability and,
Mm. Hmm.
some of my lifelong friends are people I met in Oklahoma. So, there's
That's
something
really
positive to
cool.
be found everywhere.
100%. And, I think it's okay to say that it was a bit of a culture shock, or it was a bit of, a challenge to adapt coming from a place that is kind of like, and I've never been to Guam. I would assume it's a tropical paradise. And or maybe not tropical, but still ocean, side paradise, and then going to the plains. It seems like you found a home though in Monterey. Would you say?
Yeah, I would say so. After, this is the longest I've lived somewhere continuously since I
Hmm.
left Oklahoma. Yeah. So after I graduated from college, I went and worked at Georgia Aquarium for about 3 years. So I
Okay.
lived near Atlanta for a while,
Yeah.
and then I moved out here. And in 2019, so I've been here for about 5 years, and it's been pretty awesome so far.
That's cool. And how would you compare then, uh, working at the Georgia Aquarium, living in Atlanta, which is a relatively large city, probably, I would assume, just thinking about what you've talked about so far, would have been maybe the largest place that you've lived, the largest city, population wise, maybe.
For sure.
And then to go kind of to Monterey, which has a much more manageable population in a lot of
Yeah.
ways.
I think Atlanta was an awesome place to live in my early 20s,
Okay,
lots of
yes.
like nightlife and things to do and people to meet and things like that. Um, Now I'm a little closer. Well, I just turned 30 not too long ago.
Oh,
And, I'm finding that Monterey, like, kind of fits like me slowing down a little bit more.
okay.
But, for all that, like, whenever I was away from the ocean, even in Atlanta, working at Georgia Aquarium, I was around saltwater all the time, but it's not the
Yes,
same as being by the ocean,
that's
So
right.
I think that Monterey has definitely like helped fulfill a lot of that like need in
Mm.
my heart or my soul or however you want to put it, whatever that emotional state of being is, I feel that fulfilled a little more here. So
Hmm. Salt life. I get
salt
that.
life.
Yeah. And then, so what are some of the things that really um, kind of excite you about Monterey and Monterey Bay, that area, of California?
If you enjoy anything about being outdoors, there is something for you here in Monterey. Whether
Hmm.
it not even just like the ocean related activities, but there's gorgeous hiking everywhere. We're really not that far away from Yosemite if you want to like take a little drive or a weekend trip or something like
Hmm.
that. Big Sur is directly south, which also has a lot of gorgeous hiking and camping. So basically, I think that a lot of effort has gone into preserving the natural wildlife and state of things in the Monterey area, and I think that really is that effort has paid off. Um,
Mm.
so um, Monterey Bay is within a marine protected area, so a lot of our kelp forests are doing well or better than other places that have received less protections. Um, there's if you want to go whale watching, you can do that year round here.
Yes. Hmm.
I'm an avid scuba diver, and I enjoy being out in the water. But people also enjoy stand up paddleboarding and like surfing and whatever you want to do, you can do it here in Monterey. So,
Oh, I love hearing that because I love water sports as well.
mhm,
I would say that personally, I've not had a lot of experience with scuba,
mm,
certainly engagement with sea life.
mhm.
Even though I'm a native Floridian, I pride myself on never having had a close encounter with anything that would give me the heebie-jeebies. Though I have seen a few jellyfish that I've scurried away from quickly. uh, and so I think there's a lot of opportunity there to do new things, to get into the environment and really go under the surface and explore more. What are some of the things that you enjoy showing people, or not so much the aquarium yet, because we'll get to that, but just Monterey overall as a place?
Well, I mentioned whale watching. There's a
Yes.
lot of great tour companies in the local area, and humpbacks are literally present year round. But
Hmm.
we also get blue whales and orcas, and occasional other species like gray whales. There's always dolphins around, so taking people whale watching tends to be like a lot of fun. And because there's always something out there, it's always a hit. I really
Mm.
enjoy taking people up to Elkhorn Slough, which is in Moss Landing, still within the Monterey Bay area, but a little bit north of Monterey proper. Um, and you can rent some kayaks there, and you can kayak through the slough. And there's lots of sea otters, and depending on the time of year, you might see some like other things like jellyfish or sea hares. Definitely lots of seals and like birds, if you're into bird watching and that sort of
Hmm.
thing. So those are like probably the two things that like whenever someone's visiting from out of town, I'm like, hey, we got to go do these things.
That's cool. That's cool, actually. And now you're triggering memories of the 2 summers I spent at the Marine Science Center in Jacksonville, Florida, where I took oceanography and marine biology. And we
Mm.
would go out to an estuary and just like look at crabs and look at all the all the marine life that existed in this kind of brackish water. And
Mhm.
so to then be out on the Pacific coast, completely different. Certainly I come from the flatlands. And
Mhm.
so to then be kind of in just where the cliffs meet the sea and the drama of that natural environment. And then, of course, the kind of wildlife and sea life that respond to all of that energy, all of that like kinetic kind of atmosphere there. I know it must be electrifying for people to visit.
Yeah, I mean, like if you think about John Steinbeck, um,
Mm,
he lived a lot of his life, near Salinas specifically, but which
yes.
is pretty close to the Monterey Peninsula. If you read like East of Eden or Sea of, well, uh, East of if you read East of Eden, he describes like all of this gorgeous natural life and things like
Hmm.
how a lot of the workers and stuff interact with the ocean. Yeah, I can definitely relate. And like Doc Ricketts was one of his close friends, so
Yes.
about them, yeah. And his Doc Ricketts expeditions into the Great Tide Pools, and I don't know, yeah. There's so much to discover here.
Now, I love Dalton. I am like sitting here just marveling at just how erudite you are, young man. You are, and I say young man because I saw 30 many moons ago.
Fair enough.
So,
Yeah, no, that's totally understandable.
yes. But I love it. I love, as a lover of literature, and certainly a lover of literature that really honors the great outdoors and the world that we live in. Those are some of the most impactful um, pieces of writing, pieces of art, pieces of story that I engaged with early on. And so for those pieces to have been inspired by places like Monterey, places like California itself, just this land of possibility, of opportunity. I lived there for a little while, and I see Monterey as just being one of those like crown jewels along that California coastline. And so yeah, again, happy to have you here, but really just in hearing the way you relate to be able to do so intellectually and artistically as well, I think is key for a lot of people when they travel. They want to have those multi-layered feelings of engagement. And so when you now speaking about the aquarium, that's a place that just growing up, was in, I think, the cultural awareness, at least in 20th century America. You heard about the Monterey Bay Aquarium. It's just one of those classic places that if someone's going to California, that's a place that you would want to try to get to. And I think that now is an opportunity with so many other aquariums, aquaria, I suppose, and so many other attractions vying for people's attention. I think there's something to be said for the staying power and the kind of pioneering efforts of the Monterey Bay Aquarium to establish the relationship between or improve the relationship between people and the sea. Would you say that that's part of the mission?
Absolutely. So the mission of the Monterey Bay Aquarium is to inspire conservation of the ocean.
Hmm.
And it's a mission that I relate to very personally. We've already talked about how, I grew up around the ocean and whatnot. But actually, we were stationed in California for one point in time. And when I was in middle school, I went on a field trip to Monterey Bay Aquarium. Um, and I can still remember sitting in front of the open seas window and seeing bluefin tuna and hammerhead sharks and all kinds of these, massive, crazy, awesome creatures,
Mm.
things that I had only read about and never seen in person. And just feeling like a lot of majesty and wonder. And I feel like that personal journey that I've had from going from being a child on a field trip to now working here and working with those animals, um, I feel like that just very much relates to what we're trying to
Mm.
do. Clearly, like some part of me responded to that call to inspiration, that call to conservation. And that's what I really hope, that's what I enjoy about working here at Monterey Bay Aquarium, is that I get to help participate in that legacy. The Monterey Bay Aquarium will be celebrating our 40-year anniversary this year. And, you know, obviously, as we've discussed, that's a little longer than my lifespan. So, and a lot of people, you know, we still have a lot of school
Yes,
children and,
that's right.
you know, everybody else coming through our doors every year. And even though I will never feel that impact personally of knowing, like, hey, is that kid walking by my exhibit, you know, going to grow up to be one of my coworkers one day? I'll never
Mm.
know that. But, like,
That's cool,
you
though.
know,
That's a cool thought.
yeah, right? Like,
Yes.
I will never be able to measure my direct impact, but I feel in my bones that it is there. So,
Oof, man. Listen, Dalton, your impact is just it's one drop of water in the ocean.
mhm.
But we all know that the ocean is made up of drops of
Yep.
water, right? And of course, every drop reverberates. So if nothing else, if there's one kid, one adult, one elder who is inspired by your passion for the ocean, for the aquarium itself, and for just humanity living here on this planet in concert with all of our wonderful animal family members, and plant family members and all the others. I think that makes the difference. What then would you say kind of um, is is that the most exciting thing for you?
So I think that interacting with guests often reminds me of like why I do what I do, but I
Hmm.
think the things that I find most fulfilling tend to be like a lot more of my like day-to-day work. I
Okay.
really enjoy problem solving, and as a like science-based person, I really enjoy tackling data-based or research-based or engineering problems or so on and so forth. My job is so, you know, I guess we never really explained, like, as an aquarist, I'm basically a zookeeper for fish and invertebrates.
Okay.
So, which is an important thing to talk about for what
Sure.
I have to say.
Thank you for
So,
reminding me
yeah,
of
no
my job.
worries.
It's just-
Basically, I have a good mix of intellectual and physical work, and I think both of those things in concert help keep me really engaged. Um, um, So before we hopped on this interview this morning, I was siphoning my exhibits and taking care of my animals. You know, and that's like that can be a little bit meditative, you know. And then
Mm.
eventually, you know, sometimes there's like other issues, like I need to figure out how to replumb a system, or I need to figure out how to train a new animal that has never done that before. So I there's a lot of ways to engage with what my job is. Um, so long-winded answer, but that's what I'm going with. I enjoy the problem-solving
Oh
aspect of
no, man, that's a perfect answer because I feel like it's, and I think that's important. So when we started the call, for me it was like, okay, yeah, he's an aquarist, as if I knew what that entailed.
yeah,
That
no
was
worries.
the assumption that I think, okay, works at the aquarium. And the times I've gone, I felt like, and the times I've worked in institutions, you had to do everything. And that was my assumption, was that you end up doing some of everything, and mostly caretaking, caregiving. When you look at how you relate to the fish, how you relate to the beings in the water, what are some of the things that you feel most impacted by, or that you've learned?
So I think that to be someone who performs animal husbandry, who takes care of animals, is to be a compassionate and empathetic person, because you have to relate to these animals that can't really speak to you or necessarily communicate with you super effectively. So a lot of it is about learning how to read behavior and changes, and sometimes even just like other things like what the data about water quality tell you.
Mm,
Um, so I think that one of the biggest things that I've learned is how to open my mind to different perspectives,
mhm,
first of all. And second of all, how to be adaptable to figure out what tools I need to best facilitate that communication. And on top of that, that we can take that a step further. All of our animals are ambassadors. They are helping
mm,
to participate in the mission of inspiring conservation of the ocean.
right.
When I have a guest, I want them to look at my exhibit and feel themselves transported to that environment in the wild. So even then, I'm still working on my communication, my empathy, my, how thinking about how the guest relates to my animals and not even just my own relationship. So,
Mm,
yeah, that's
okay.
probably the big takeaway from my job.
What are some of the biggest challenges that you feel like you face um, in your day to day?
I think everybody assumes that people who work with animals for a living spend most of their time playing with animals. And the answer is that's really just not true. I spend most of my time working with people. And
Yes.
sometimes that's kind of the challenging part is like, I want to get back to working with my animals. I want to go and
Mm,
feed and play with them and, you know, provide enrichment and all this other stuff. But we have other things we need to do. I work on a whole team of people, and I'm a senior on that team. So, I spend a lot of time mentoring as well, and teaching. So I think sometimes the challenging parts can be keeping everything in perspective, like we do these things so that we can all collectively provide better care, ever evolving care,
mhm.
for our collection. And I don't know. I think that can be the human aspect of my job can be easy to lose track of if you don't actively work on
Okay. Well, in that regard, it sounds just like every other
it.
humaning on the
You're
field.
completely correct.
Yeah.
I think, yeah, I drew that distinction because a lot of people expect, oh, I can get away from working with people, and it's like,
Right.
no.
Oh man, listen, I don't think there's much to be gained from running away.
Yeah.
In my experience, it's been okay. Yes, I get to take a respite. I get to come out in nature and really commune and connect. But that's part of that is to then go back into the fray, into the world, and be amongst it. In thinking about that, when people come visit the aquarium, what do you want them to take home with them?
Whenever people come and visit the aquarium, I hope that they're thinking about our oceans and, how I hope they come away from the aquarium feeling connected to the ocean specifically, and that they feel a little bit of empathy for it. We our mission is to inspire conservation of the ocean, and that's not something that is passively done.
Mm,
We need to actively work on it. Um, you know, Promote sustainable choices in our homes and advocate for legislation that helps protect marine environments. And if we stand by passively, these things will not get done.
mm,
So I hope that when people come away from the aquarium, they see how important it is to feel that connection and lean into it, um, to do something small, So
well, that's
yeah,
that goes.
that's what I'm hoping to come away from it with.
Well, no, that goes back to the idea of each one of us being a drop in the ocean, right? Like every
Mhm.
drop matters. And so, what do you believe is something that we can do at home in support of the mission, in support of the aquarium, or in support of our own localities where we live?
Well, first of all, we can start with plastics. Everybody has heard reduce, reuse, recycle. So minimizing your contribution to plastic waste is a great first step that a lot of people can do at home with no additional cost. Maybe a little additional effort, but um, another option would be to check out Monterey Bay Aquarium's website, check out our Seafood Watch program, and learn about some sustainable options for what you can eat at home. I learned recently that all rockfish that are caught in the U.S. are actually a best choice or good alternative rating from our Seafood Watch program, which means you can eat rockfish pretty much guilt-free for the most part. Um, you know, there are, you can also decide to donate to a lot of marine conservation. You can also choose to donate to marine conservation organizations, including Monterey Bay Aquarium, or come visit us and maybe purchase a membership or something in the gift store. So,
I
a lot
love
of
that.
different ways to support
Yes.
the ocean.
100%, man. And we support you. We support our oceans. We support Monterey Bay Aquarium. Dalton Richardson, thank you so much, man. You are an inspiration. I really appreciate having you be uh, standing in the solution. And again, every drop helps. Thank you again so much for being here, and it was a wonderful chat.
Thanks for having me on. I really appreciate the opportunity to chat with you. So,
Have a good day, man. Thank you.
thanks.
Okay, so man, you were amazing.
Thanks.